Sidney Perkowitz, welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Russell. Thank you.
Sidney Perkowitz is the Professor Emeritus of Physics at Emory University. Sidney has authored many research papers and books, including Empire of Light, Universal Foam, Digital People, Hollywood Science, and has just recently re-released an updated version of Universal Foam for Kindle called Universal Foam 2.0. If you want to learn more about Sidney Perkowitz, visit sidneyperkowitz.net. Sidney, at the recent Academy Awards, Eddie Redmayne won Best Actor for his portrayal of Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything. I haven't seen the movie, but you have, and you've even met Stephen Hawking. I'd like to get your thoughts on the movie and Eddie Redmayne's portrayal.
I thought the movie was really, really well done. The one thing one needs to realize is that it came from a certain perspective, because it was based on a book written by Stephen Hawking's ex-wife. Now, the book is not a bad book in the sense that there's anything vengeful about it or anything like that. She really seems to get into how their marriage went, its ups and downs, very honestly. But it is written from her perspective. So you could say almost it's more a story of how a certain family and a certain marriage developed under very difficult circumstances, and then only partly a story about the physics itself. But all of that was well put together, and I really gave it high marks. I thought Redmayne really deserved the award. He did a fabulous job on portraying this guy.
You've met Stephen Hawking. What were your thoughts after meeting him?
It's just remarkable, and it's really a mixed set of thoughts. So one thought is here is a man who really has done very original thinking in physics. That's something to appreciate, for us to be proud of, and for him to be proud of. But then you say to yourself, but the other side of his life has been so difficult. You know, on balance, how does he look at it himself? Does he feel like a victim, for instance? The movie says he does not, by the way. He always wanted to be very independent, and that's really something to cheer. But there must be moments of despair down in there. You know, he was diagnosed to have this neural disease, ALS, Lou Gehrig disease, in his 20s. And he's now, let's see, he was born in 1942, so he's now over 70. That's 50 years that his physical life is deteriorating. It's really a very sad thing, and you wonder how he has dealt with it all these years. But then there's one little tiny upside. It's maybe not much of an upside, but it crosses my mind. If your body were immobilized and all you had to work with were your mind, maybe that would make you do the absolute 110% best you could with your mind. And maybe that's part of what has spurred him on. So I think that's the one ray of sunlight in that whole story.
You know, there are many physicists out there, many. Stephen Hawking, of course, is a recognizable character. Is he overrated, or is he truly that brilliant?
I think he's very brilliant. What hasn't happened yet is he hasn't put together a theory with the sweep of relativity or quantum mechanics. Could still happen, and he's currently dealt with aspects of all those areas. His research goes all the way from areas that would come under Einstein's relativity, all the way down to the submicroscopic world that involves quantum mechanics. So he covers pieces of all of that, but he's not an Einstein who came up with a whole new theory that really changed the world. Of course, comparing yourself to Einstein is a very high bar. So he is at an extremely high level.
But he's in the conversation.
Absolutely. And he interacts with other significant physicists, and what that means is his peers take him seriously. So it's not just the judgment of an average person or someone who sees the film and thinks he sounds like a smart guy. He gets respect from his peers, and that's maybe the best measure that there can be of whether someone is really doing something important, making significant contributions. For instance, he's interacted with Kip Thorne a lot, and Kip Thorne is a very well-known theorist.
Well, Stephen Hawking wrote A Brief History of Time. Is that a great book?
I think it's great partly for the content and partly at the time. I mean, this goes back quite a few years now, and and there has not been the kind of surge in popular science writing that has developed since then. Also, it was not so very, very common for active scientists to be able to write popular science. So he brought all those things together. He captured the imagination of the people. The fact that he was this physically laid up added something to the mystique, too. So the whole thing came together in a really unusual way. Yeah, I have to say that that book was a once in 10 or 20 years phenomenon anyway.
But it must be an extremely dumbed-down version of physics, to a physicist. This is armchair physics, essentially.
Yes, but parts of it are quite a difficult slog. So you'll hear a lot of people say, I bought it, I heard about it, I got into it so far, but that's as far as I could get. So not all that dumbed down. And also, although that can be an accurate description for a lot of pop science writing, that it is dumbed down, the thing about having a real scientist write it is that that person, he or she, if he's a real scientist, will make every effort to keep the writing as simple as they can, but not to distort the science. And I wouldn't believe a scientist like Hawking would change one word of the real science just to make it more palatable. He would find a way to tell it just as simply as he could, but still have integrity in it. And I like to think that's the way I write about science. I really would pride myself on working very hard not to get the science wrong, but trying to make it understandable at the same time.
Well, what are your thoughts on Michio Kaku? I'm sure you've heard of him.
Not only that, he's interviewed me just as you have interviewed me. So he's a real physicist, too. He has a very strong background. He likes to write the big sweeping books about huge topics. He does very good research. He travels and talks to people and so on. I think he backs up his facts very well. He also sees himself as a futurist. It just happened this morning. I was looking at something on a website about him, and he's described as a futurist. If you're a futurist, you have to be a little bit speculative. And when you're speculative, well, sometimes that's when what you're saying is not guaranteed to be 100% correct. It's a maybe, or a high probability, that's all you can say. But as long as you identify it that way, then I don't see a thing in the world wrong with producing that kind of commentary. As long as you say to people, here's what I'm saying that is absolutely known, here's what I'm saying that might be true, and here's why it might work and why it might not work, I think you're just being honest, and it's actually great to have that much imagination put into the story.
But you don't believe in the 11-dimensional universe?
I believe it could be a valid physical theory. In other words, it hasn't been made up from whole cloth. It's not a fantasy. But I don't see the scientific evidence for it yet.
I'm interested if the 11 dimensions are a fudge factor in the math.
Well, everything about string theory is based on math. So you have to have some faith that the math has two things, that the math has been well done, and I got to assume it has. A lot of brilliant people have worked out the equations. But then step two is, can you back up the math with an experimental reality? And that's where we're not yet.
Yeah, not even close.
Not even close. I mean, the thinking is not only have we not done any experiments that can prove or disprove string theory, it isn't clear that we could ever possibly be able to do such an experiment, because the energies involved would be so high that we can't imagine a human construction that would approach them. So that's one of the really, really big issues around string theory. But I would not go around and say ever that this is a wrong theory. It is backed up as well as the math can take it, but we need that second step.
You know, the saddest thing with this planet is that we've chosen the business of killing, the business of war, instead of science and exploration as our pastime. There's no money in a lot of this stuff. I'm concerned about the future of science.
And it's not looking any better. If you look at the national budgets, at least in the U.S., it may be a bit different in Canada, I'm not sure. Science is not getting really fantastic wholehearted support, except one area, medical science, still seems to be doing okay. And that's because we're all aging, including our congressmen and our senators. and everyone wants better medicine, so that gets money. But the stuff that's more pure research, what's the nature of the universe, are there really 11 dimensions, that kind of thing, maybe not getting as much support as it used to. Yes, I think you're right about that.
Bringing it back to Stephen Hawking, he recently said, "I believe that the long-term future of the human race must be space, and that it represents an important life insurance for our future survival, which could prevent the disappearance of humanity by colonizing other planets." By the way, Hawking is 73 now.
That's right.
Will we destroy ourselves before colonizing space?
Let's see. I can give you either a one-word answer, which would be either yes or no. No, I don't think we will. I think humanity always muddles through. That's my considered opinion. As dire as things think, we have a way of pulling them out of the fire at the last minute. And number two is, when you think about what it would take to really colonize space, I believe we're so long away from doing that at any kind of scale that we'll have plenty of time to work out the difficulties on Earth. You know, if you look at the movie Interstellar, that was about colonizing space, not even in our own solar system, but around other stars. And the technology to do that is so far beyond us right now that we have a long, long time to think about this.
If you were to project, I mean, I know we were supposed to be in flying cars by now, if you look at any of the science fiction movies of the 1940s or 50s.
Yes.
But is this 1,000 years away? 500 years away?
If you want to talk, let's say, about putting a colony that could sustain itself on a planet in our solar system, I'd put that in the hundreds of years, not the thousands of years. I think we could certainly, and they're talking about it now, we could certainly have people on Mars within a couple of decades. But I'm not talking about a colony that's big enough to save the human population. I'm talking about 6 very brave astronauts who said, okay, I'll go to Mars and hope I'll survive. So building huge colonies way, way far in the future. But he's right. It's the last-ditch thing. And in the last ditch, if the whole human race really came close to wiping itself out, thermonuclear weapons or something even worse, surely we could certainly find a way to send 10 or 50 or 100 people elsewhere in the universe and hope they could start a new human race. But massive colonization, I don't see in the cards for a long, long time.
You know, another thing one could do is simply send out seeds. Just as, you know, the theory of panspermia. Instead of sending people, we could just send the seeds of people, DNA, fly it out into space.
That's been proposed. If I'm not mistaken, Arthur Clarke, the science fiction writer, I think has written about that too. And that would be a lot cheaper in terms of person power and money and effort. But it's like a shotgun effect, right? You hope that one of those seeds will take root in the right place and continue the human race. None of us would have the sense that we personally, you, Russell, and me, Sidney, and all the rest of us, would survive in these other places. But it would be the race that would survive, and that would be something.
How close is the nearest solar system?
Oh, I don't know offhand the exact number of light years, but I'll put it this way. What I do remember is the nearest star, which is not known to have a solar system, is 4 light years. That's about 24 trillion miles. And the nearest solar system that I remember is probably in the range of 20, 30, 40, 50 light years. So you're talking 10 times as far as the nearest star. And if you want the numbers to reach even that nearest star, Alpha Centauri, which is 4 light years away, at the current speed of a NASA spacecraft, would take thousands and thousands of years. Let me put it another way. This is a nice thing to pin it to, and I think it gives a sense of how big space is. We launched Voyager spacecraft, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, around 1975. And they took looks at Saturn and Jupiter, and then just kept heading right out of the solar system. They've been traveling for 40 years. That means 1975 to 2015. And they've just now reached the edge of interstellar space. They're nowhere near another star. They're just at the beginning point where interstellar space starts and our solar system ends. That took 40 years. So that gives you an idea.
Again, another comment by Stephen Hawking in December of last year. Stephen Hawking was warning of the possible peril of pursuing artificial intelligence without regard to possible consequence. He told the BBC that fully developed AI could spell the end of the human race. I know that your son is also working with AI. What are your thoughts on this? Could AI turn on their creators and enslave or exterminate humanity?
Yeah, I'm glad you remembered. My son Mike is involved. I had mentioned that before. That's about as likely, I think, as being able to colonize other stars in the next 10 years, by which I mean very unlikely. AI has made huge strides, but not always in the directions that people expect. One aspect of AI, for instance, is learning how to mine huge databases, and that doesn't have much to do with actually creating thinking and living life forms. But some of that research is going on. Progress is being made. I'm working on a book now that will talk about this a little bit, so I've looked into it a little bit. And you can point to specific aspects of creating a living thing. For instance, there are now robots that walk a lot better than robots were able to do 10 years ago. There are robots that can simulate emotion. They don't really feel it, but they can simulate it. So pieces of it are coming. But putting it all together to really create something that is self-aware enough to decide that it doesn't like humans and wants to wipe them out, still a long way away. I would hesitate to put years on it, but I think it's not very likely in the foreseeable future. I would leave it at that.
Do you think, so are you saying it's inevitable, or it's not even on the horizon, not even worth talking about?
It's absolutely inevitable that scientists will try very hard. You can never come up with a scientific challenge that some scientists won't want to try to meet. So the challenge of creating something that is indistinguishable from a human will keep people going a long, long time. But I think it's a very difficult task.
I have my computer on 24/7. It never says to me, hey, give me a day off, will you?
Mine either, thank God. We'd have to start paying it a salary, too, and giving it vacation.
Absolutely, and they would need a union.
A union, yes.
Yes, the robot union.
You know, there's that old Woody Allen film, I don't remember which film it was, but it has something, it's the one set in the future, I think. And the hero, which is Woody Allen, kind of gets mad, I think, at a toaster that burned his toast. And he steps in the elevator, and the elevator says to him, I heard you were kicking that toaster around. So this is where all those machines have enough intelligence to be linked to each other and to look out for each other. But he foresaw all of that a long time ago.
Well, there is a bit of truth to that. You know, we have smart homes now. I mean, my computers are hooked up to my TV and my TV to my cell phone, and I'm sure that all the appliances will eventually be hooked up and integrated with each other, all being energy smart.
Right.
You know, maybe one day the home will say, no, you can't do this. This is the way it's got to be.
You know, there's a refrigerator in the market called smart refrigerators. With not many people have bought them, but in principle they work. So you could hook it up so that it will let you know when your milk is low and then go ahead and order some more milk. So I wrote a little article that took it a step further and said, well, maybe that smart refrigerator will have a scanner that will look at you when you walk in and open the door and says, you know, you put on a little weight. I'm not going to open the door for you today.
And the government will be behind all this and regulating what your BMI should be and, right, you know, and how much food's available to the general public. It
could reach that point. Right now I'm sticking with my old-fashioned fridge. Thank you.
Well, that's why I'm not going to get one of these fridges. I don't want to be told when to eat or when not to. I'm not a criminal.
Right.
We're running out of food. There are, you know, GMO products. They're trying to solve food shortages or take over the food industry. You remember the movie Soylent Green?
Oh, absolutely. I've written about it.
Yeah, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Could there be a food product created that feeds the entire world and solves the food shortage problem?
Yes, in principle there could, and it would not involve what Soylent Green involves. Everyone knows the punchline by now, right? So we can say that. I mean, the movie is many years old.
Soylent Green is people.
It's people, yeah. So, no, I don't think we have to go to cannibalism. There are people who have worked on growing what is real meat. This is real meat. It's not a GMO. It's not a meat substitute. It's real meat using the same technology that stem cells use. You take a cell from a real animal, a real cow, culture it in the lab, and after a while you have a steak, except it's been made in the lab. This has been done at a very small scale. It's at the scale of making some hamburger-size food. There's no reason it couldn't be scaled up. It's quite expensive as it is now, but like almost everything in technology, once you go from small scale to big scale, and someone's willing to put in the money to develop it right, you can make it work. So there are backup plans that do not involve more farming or raising more crops or slaughtering more animals. There are other approaches that would produce food that I think people would be happy to eat. It's a little weird to say to someone, this steak was made in a lab, but it's a lot better than saying to someone, this steak was made from wholly artificial ingredients. So I don't think it's that big a problem about this kind of thing catching on, and it's one possible solution if things really start to go bad.
You would eat this product?
Yes, I would. Absolutely, I would.
Do GMO foods concern you?
No, they don't. Except I put one little underline on that. They don't concern me if I were 100% sure that they were entirely vetted by and said this is okay by the scientists behind them. What happens is, of course, that big corporations get involved in making these things. So the science and the safety issues get filtered through the PR machine of a big corporation. And then I start to lose some faith that I'm being told the truth. So I trust the science, I trust the scientists, I don't trust how it's filtered through our corporate system.
Hey, listen, if they allow cigarettes to be sold on the public market, I'm not certain about a corporation's caring of the public.
Exactly right. Their goals are to maximize profit, and that doesn't leave much room for people.
No, to maximize profit without any interest of environmental or social costs whatsoever.
I'm 100% with you. America is the country that I think that wants to be the least socialistic of any country in the world, and capitalism has done a lot of good things here, at least provide a lot of energy, and we have a lot of very successful corporations, but I don't think that there's quite enough concern for the public welfare.
There's so much paranoia out there that if they even attempt to go a little bit socialist, people completely freak out.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, you and I could have a whole separate discussion about differences between the American and the Canadian attitudes toward these things.
Has the Big Bang Theory been canceled?
No, I wouldn't.
No?
No. Are you talking about the latest results where they first claimed that they found some really good fingerprints of the Big Bang, and then it turned out to be not right because interstellar dust got in the way?
I'm talking about the theories now that are coming out of almost all the universities that are saying that space is infinite and that mathematics allows for that.
Well, again, I go back to the same things I say about string theory. There may be some beautiful math that backs it up. There's also beautiful math that backs up the idea of multiverses. That has not been proven. There's beautiful math that backs up different ideas for the origin of the universe. All these theories are great, and they're made by brilliant people, and that's part of the problem. There are so many brilliant people out there with lots of different theories that you can pick almost any one you like, and it will have possible scientific validity, but unproven.
So I had a thought, and I'm certain others have. There's probably not many original thoughts out there left. Are all universes inside of a black hole? I'll carry the thought on a bit here. So when you see a black hole, could that be the outside of a newly forming universe, and everything that it sucks in inside the event horizon gets spewed out the other end as a singularity, and that is creating a Big Bang in that universe? And the fact that it's filling up, could that explain expansion? And then I would say that eventually all universes would die as they would drain into black holes, each black hole creating a new universe.
Well, I'd say that's more likely than it would have been a few years ago, and the reason is that the old image of a black hole was that once something got in, it could never, ever get out. That's the way we all think about it, both in the real science and in science fiction. But one of the things Stephen Hawking did, which was really a breakthrough, was he showed that in principle there is a way for stuff to leave a black hole after it gets in. It involves quantum mechanics. I don't know enough of the theory in detail to give you a good analogy to it, but I would just say the breakthrough is something once in a black hole isn't necessarily in there forever. So what you just described is maybe not outside the realm of possibility. I don't know if anyone has a serious mathematically worked out theory for that. I wouldn't be surprised if someone did, or maybe you've read such a thing. I
believe it has some similarities to Nassim Haramain, who is a physicist out in Hawaii.
Yes, I've heard his name. Okay. I don't know a lot about his contributions in detail, but that says to me there's at least one person who's thought this through and thinks it's feasible. And it may go back to what I told you about Hawking, the idea that he discovered that there are ways for things to leak out of a black hole.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. There's a type of radiation that gets thrown out of a black hole.
Well, it could be Hawking radiation. So perhaps we're talking about the same thing, just from a couple of different viewpoints.
I enjoy talking with you about movies and how the physics of a movie, whether or not they're based in reality or not. We did a really great show once with James Kakalius and covered a lot of that.
Yes.
How about lightsabers? Are they a possible technology? And that's my son's question. He's 7 years old, and he wanted me to ask you.
Yeah, great question. And you know what? They are closer to being possible by a lot than when the first Star Wars came out. And the reason is that since then, this goes back now about 10 years, and Star Wars goes back over 20 years. About 10 years ago, a woman working at Harvard found a way to take a ray of light, first slow it down. So instead of going 300,000 kilometers a second, she slowed it down to about the speed of a bicycle. And then she found a way to stop the light dead. It's unbelievable. You can actually take a beam of light, send it through her equipment. When it hits the equipment, it stops. It stops and it's stored there. So part of the thing about a lightsaber is apparently it creates a beam of light, but instead of going on for miles and miles until it finally loses energy, it stops in about a meter. And I think that is now closer to being possible than it was, as I said, when the movie first came out. So we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. So the answer to your son is, this is, when he grows up, he's 7 now, let's give it 15 more years, this might not be out of the question at all.
And they recently were able to bend light into a Mobius strip.
Isn't that fascinating? I had just spent some time with my granddaughter showing her a paper Mobius strip, which she got a huge charge out of. I figure I started her on the way to being an astronaut if she wants to be one. And yes, so what they did was take light, and you know, light, you can say light has two directions associated with it. One is the direction that it's traveling. That's just the direction of motion of the wave. But also, since light is electromagnetic, the other thing that's associated with it is an electric field. And you could represent that electric field by an arrow. What they've done is take an array of light and take that arrow and bend it around, twist it until it goes through a half twist and then comes back and rejoins itself. That's an optical Mobius strip. It's a fantastic piece of technology that they're able to do this. And it doesn't have any particular practical application. It just shows that the degree of control that we now have over light is really just astonishing.
Yes, but using that same kind of technology, you can use that to build up the fundamentals of lightsabers.
Good point. I hadn't thought about that. It connects with the other question. Yes, maybe indeed. So I guess what we're both saying is between learning how to stop light and how to manipulate it in any kind of shape, we're getting that much closer to a lightsaber.
You know, I have a theory. I have a theory that, and I'm sure you would, well, first of all, would you say that people basically remember everything? It's just a matter of whether or not you can recall it?
There's a footnote to that, though, and we just heard about it in this country with the guy, the newscaster who misremembered that his helicopter had been shot on. The news anchor who got into a lot of trouble over that.
Yeah, Brian Williams.
That's it. I didn't know it was a big story at your end of the world, too. So, yeah, we remember, but we don't remember accurately.
But the memory must be in there somewhere.
There's apparently something in there somewhere. I do a lot of crossword puzzles, and my pride is I never look up a word. It's got to be in my head, or I just don't do it. And I often find that I'll look at a puzzle, I'll fill maybe half of it, but I don't know the other words. I go away and do other stuff, and when I come back 3 hours later, the answers are there. It was in my memory. My filing system just needed some time to work on it, and eventually it pulled out the word or the name or the city or whatever I needed to fill in the clue properly. So yes, I believe it's there, but it's the access system which doesn't always work well.
Yes, I once heard the brain described as a problem-solving device, and that any problem that you give it, on some level, it's working on it. So quite often, like you're saying you gave yourself 2 or 3 hours to work on the crossword puzzle, there'll be something on the tip of your tongue. Maybe it's a person's name or a place. And then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 hours later, there's some eureka moment, and it's there.
Yes.
Because on some level, your brain was working on it for you.
Right. And it didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't beamed down to you from Mars. It was in your head. The other part of your brain just had to find it.
Right. So what I guess I'm getting at is, if we remember everything, could we pass on those memories through the DNA to our children? And then if you go backwards, say, could that mean that the entire history of humanity is in fact somehow stored into our DNA? And if we could unlock those codes, could we learn the secrets of history?
Well, that raised a lot of interesting thoughts. There are a lot of people who would believe that humanity has a racial memory. There's a psychiatrist named Carl Jung. You might have heard of Jungian analysis. It was once a big thing along with Freudian analysis and so on. Jung thought that a lot of our personal lives and thoughts were influenced by racial memory, somehow stored in us. But that was before DNA was such a big thing. Now you're putting a more modern spin on it, I guess, and you're asking, what were once individual memories be stored in our DNA? I think the strict scientific answer is no. I'm not a huge DNA expert, but I think I'm right about this. DNA forms the blueprint for everything in your body. That's true. So it tells where your fingers are and your toes and where your brain is and how it will develop and so on. I don't think it goes down to the level of the contents in your brain. So I'd be very surprised if DNA actually carries a memory of a person that your grandfather met 100 years ago.
They're making hard drives now out of DNA. And in fact, they just recently built a hard drive that can store data for up to 1 million years.
Well, this makes sense to me because DNA is made out of 4 basic acids, the abbreviated GATC. The names are long chemical names, okay? They can use those 4 building blocks, and there are millions and millions of them in DNA. Use each one of them to store a bit. So, yeah, they're using it like an organic computer. The movie Jurassic Park, where they recreate dinosaurs out of old DNA, is kind of half true. We haven't found DNA that's 65 million years old, which is what you would need to recreate DNA. But people have found DNA that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and it's lasted that long, and it's in pretty good shape. But I don't think that says anything about passing memories in my DNA to my grandchild's DNA. I don't think it's about that.
I also was reading something recently that you can create a dinosaur from a chicken.
Yeah, they're related, so that makes sense to me too.
And just last question of the day, last topic here. The God particle. And I have to say I don't really appreciate the name the God particle. I think it's misleading, and I don't even know what it really means. So what is the God particle? They claim to have found it.
That book came out a long time ago. It was written by a Nobel laureate who I'd even met. Let me see if I can...
But you can't remember his name.
Yeah, this is sad, isn't it? You're talking about bad memory.
You'll get it in a couple hours, don't worry.
It'll come right, thank you. But whoever it was, what I've heard, he didn't tell me directly. What I've heard is that was not his title for the book. The publisher chose it, which happens all the time. Anyone who's ever written a book has this complaint. Publisher picks a title that he thinks will sell better, and there you go. That's the end of the story right there. Okay, the man who wrote it, and I'm ashamed for not remembering his name because he's very famous, Leon Letterman. And not only was he a Nobel laureate, which means a good physicist, he spent a lot of time involved in trying to educate people about science. He was in the Chicago area, and he did a lot of work with Chicago school children. So I want to make sure he gets all the credit he deserves. So let's see, this book came out a long time ago. It's been quite a while. But even then, the Higgs boson was seen as very, very important. But I'm not sure I would call that kind of the ultimate particle. And they're all important. A universe wouldn't be the same if almost any one of them were missing. So that even lends more weight to the thought that some publisher maybe stuck that name on there.
I'll bring us back to Stephen Hawking from where we started.
Okay.
Stephen Hawking never thought that they would find the so-called God particle. He was found wrong in 2012. But Hawking has also gone on to say that the Higgs boson could destroy the universe, and that would be the Higgs boson doomsday theory, where a quantum fluctuation creates a vacuum bubble that expands through space and wipes out the universe. Your thoughts on that? And by the way, he's really got a lot of dire warnings for us. He's getting kind of morbid in his old age.
Well, you know, it happens to all of us as we get older. It gets harder and harder to stay optimistic. A God particle, a Higgs boson, could somehow be connected to a quantum fluctuation that would grow and wipe out the universe. Well, one thing to say is there really are things called quantum fluctuations. This goes back to the idea that at its core, quantum mechanics is random. That's what Einstein hated about it. That's where his famous quote came about God not playing dice with the universe. So there are things called quantum fluctuations. You can imagine that way down at the submicroscopic level, particles and energy pop into existence randomly and then disappear randomly. That's a quantum fluctuation. But it's not necessarily destructive. One theory of the origin of the universe is that it began in a quantum fluctuation. At first there was nothing. I know this is, one cannot wrap one's mind around this, but I'll just say the words. First there was nothing. Then out of pure randomness, a fluctuation began that existed and then grew into the universe. So there's no reason to think another fluctuation might not appear and be something extremely major, grow into another universe, destroy our universe, whatever. Why Hawking would specifically tie it to the Higgs boson, I don't know. But the idea of a quantum fluctuation is a real idea. But then you have to stop and think, yeah, but this is a rare event. Quantum fluctuations appear and disappear all the time, trillions and trillions and trillions every second all around us. Why we should worry about one particular one that blows things up seems far-fetched to me.
No, I don't believe that God plays dice with the universe, and if it appears to be random, it's because we don't understand it.
There's a lot about this we don't understand, and it's very hard for humans to swallow the idea that things happen for random reasons. I mean, that's part of the reason that people want to believe that there's some greater spirit guiding things.
If you want to learn more about Sidney Perkowitz, check out his website, sidneyperkowitz.net. Sidney, is there anything I haven't asked you today that you wanted to share with us?
No, we really had a great range of conversation today. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and maybe there's some questions for next time. And also, if anyone who listens to our interview has questions and wants to send them in to you, I'll be glad to try to respond to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do a mailbag show one day.
That'll be fun, and that includes your son. We can start with him.
A programming note to the audience. We've talked a lot about Stephen Hawking today, and Stephen Hawking, of course, wrote A Brief History of Time. He also co-wrote A Briefer History of Time with Leonard Mlodinow, physicist Leonard Mlodinow. and Leonard Mlodinow will be on the Russell Scott Show this May. So definitely looking forward to that. Again, if you want to learn more about Sidney Perkowitz, check out sidneyperkowitz.net. Sidney, very mind-expanding stuff. Thank you so much for being on the program.
And thank you for all the great questions. What a great variety. Keep it up. Anytime.